Hello and welcome to the webinar, How to Keep Your Finance Team from Quietly Quitting. My name is Michael with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have a few administrative details to share with you, and then we'll dive into our presentation. First, we'd like to thank Bill.com for their partnership with today's event. They've been a wonderful thought leadership partner with Argyle and are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. So thank you again to Bill.com. We appreciate you joining us today. We welcome you to stay connected during today's event. And for those of you who are active tweeters, please follow us on Twitter at Argyle Exec Forum. I also want to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we've curated based on the feedback we've received over the years from our members. We've worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we appreciate our members' support of this policy. For those seeking CPE credit today, you must answer at least 3 polling questions and remain on the session for its duration. Polls can be found under the Polls tab on the right-hand side of your console next to chat. Afterwards, if you are eligible to receive credit, you will receive an email with a link to your certificates. If you have any questions on credits, please email cpe@argyleforum.com. Finally, and most importantly, we want to hear from you, so please submit all questions that come up during today's event into the chat section of the interface. Now, before we get started, I would like to have our speaker introduce herself, and then we'll begin our discussion. So first off, Sharon, can you please introduce yourself and let everyone know, what do you mean when you talk about quiet quitting? And with that, thank you for being here and welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sharon Mahoney. I'm the CFO for Creative Kids. I have been in the CPG industry sitting in the finance department for most of my career. I have worked at big corporates such as Burberry and Estee Lauder. And in the past 6 years, I have been in medium-sized growth companies sitting as finance executive. And so in the past 6 years, I've had the pleasure of having to build out accounting and finance teams, and especially in the growth companies when things are constantly changing and how to keep your team engaged. Also been through the past 3 years, we all went through COVID, working remote. Our day-to-day life has been uprooted. And yeah, so I think this has been a trending buzzword for a while of quiet quitting. We've all heard a lot about it. And what is quiet quitting? Quiet quitting is really being not engaged at work. People who do the bare minimum required and are psychologically detached from their job. Quiet quitters are people who reap no psychological rewards from their work and who therefore don't feel motivated to do more than it takes to get a paycheck. Understanding this is a first step of solving it. Preventing quiet quitting starts with understanding what it is and why it's happening. As we have mostly been remote during the height of COVID, and now most companies are either fully remote or have a hybrid work environment. Some hybrid work environment still does not provide the same atmosphere of an office environment, as companies look to cut costs and look to share workspaces with no dedicated schedule of an office days. Most employees engage in quiet quitting only after their relationship with their employer has already failed. It doesn't happen all at once. For many, it's a gradual decline in motivation. Employees feel isolated, disconnected from people and purpose, and they look for satisfaction in other sources.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, let's move on to our next question. Does it matter if your employees are only doing what's in their job description and aren't doing anything beyond that? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely, really, it matters a lot. Quiet quitting hurts. It hurts productivity, it hurts team morale, and it makes it infinitely harder for companies to stay competitive. Also, this causes attrition. Attrition causes company not only money, but you lose institutional knowledge, and it's very time costly to having to constantly hire and retrain employees. And when employees don't feel like they are engaged and that they are personally invested in the company, especially when you look at a macroeconomic climate that we're heading into in the next 12 to 24 months, this could really be crucial for employers to retain their employees. So I think lack of loyalty to the company or the feeling like they're not a part of something bigger really hurts the company. Collaboration, cooperation decreases amongst departments and even within your own team.
Thank you. So now, what are some of the ways that finance leaders can recognize and understand when their employees are quiet quitting?
Yeah, so it really puts on the leaders to be observant and actually listen intently and pay attention to their employee, not just what they're saying, but what they're not saying in their body language. If somebody that is usually outspoken suddenly becomes quiet, or if somebody's usually very actively participating in meetings, coming up with ideas and suggestions or questions, and they suddenly become quiet, that's a really big indicator that this person is quiet quitting. Or when their mentality becomes, this is good enough, or I've done my job, or, well, it's not my problem. Lack of ownership, lack of responsibility. I think those are really big indicators that this employee is disengaged and participating in quiet quitting. Body language is another indicator. I know a lot of times we're remote, but even through Zoom calls, you can, or digital calls, you can see, are they crossing their arms? Are they leaning in? Are they paying attention? Are they on the phone? Do they have a smile? Or are they just, is their camera even, are they constantly not on camera? I think these are type of the body languages that you can pick up. And employee engagement survey also is very important to keep a pulse on your employees, how they're feeling, what they're experiencing. So I think having collaboration with the HR department to keep a pulse on your employees through employee engagement survey is another important way for leaders to recognize, understand what is happening. And also just talk to your employees as to what is causing this disengagement, or checking in with them. Come up with corrective measures to address employees' concern instead of brushing it off. Follow through with your promise so you don't further lose trust and credibility with the employee.
Thank you. Great insight. Okay, our next question. What are some specific actions that finance leaders can take to address quiet quitting that is caused by overwork or lack of efficient processes?
Yes, so I've been in that situation quite a bit, especially in growth companies. I think managing expectations early on is incredibly important. You might not be able to define all the expectations or what is going to come up, but letting them know that you are there to support them as much as they're to support you, and that it's a safe space that they can always give you feedbacks. Manage their expectation. It is not unheard of for the needs for the teams to change or for roles to widen in scope over time or even temporarily. The reality of this ever-changing business world is that most roles evolve beyond the description in the job posting, and roles should evolve. A person should evolve. Their responsibility should evolve so they feel like they can progress in their career. But I think communication and managing what that looks like is incredibly important. Especially if they're skilled or talented, the reaction is always to lean on that person more, to give that person more, expose them more, or rely on them more. But you also still have to make sure that this desire to lean on this person more is reciprocated, that this person has a capacity to do more, they want to do more, and what they're interested in. Simply telling a person, well, here's another thing you can do. It's your time to shine. It's your time to step up, without really understanding what this employee has on their plate, or is this an area that they're interested in, that they're engaged in. Then it becomes just dumping another thing onto an employee, even though you can use all the words that seems encouraging, but in reality, it's just asking them to do more. So I think it's really important to have these conversations with your employees of, how do you feel about taking this on? How do you feel about, doing this? What is on your plate? Do you think you can take on more? And explain to them why you want them to do this. I think this will be good for your career development. Or it could be simply, hey, we are looking to backfill a role. Unfortunately, we have to divide the work amongst the team. But I am giving them a solution. I am actively recruiting. We're actively backfilling the role and show appreciation. Thank you for taking this on. So there's multiple ways. So again, I think it's about the two-way street. And they can also help employees prioritize. Um, that's minimizes chaos. And a lot of times I've seen employees, they're not unwilling to do the work. They're not unwilling to go that extra mile, but they stop wanting to do that when they feel like it's chaotic. You can't just tell them, well, all of this didn't get done. You need to figure it out. This is why you're their manager. You have to help them. And if they really are so overwhelmed, you're there to support them as much as they're there to support you. You need to lead by example and step in and actually help them. See, and really, and when you ask them, hey, can I help you? Really mean it and follow through with it, and not just reshuffling and redelegating to other team members. And I think recognizing and acknowledge workload is really important, and give them a plan of action, how this will be solution, and so they can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And if there is any inefficient processes, ask them, where do you think there's inefficiencies? What's causing the inefficiencies? And take the lead on coming up with solutions. If they can come up with solutions themselves, then they can be sitting in your role. Then what benefit do you have? What role? You're there to lead and help. And you are supposed to be able to solution better than them. That's why you're in the leadership role, and help build better processes and utilize technology when possible to mitigate manual redundant work. Yes, I step into my new role at Creative Kids. That's one of the things I am doing, is evaluating the processes and onboarding the new technology that can streamline workload, so people not only can alleviate their workload, but they feel like there's progress and they can move and they can go on to bigger, better things instead of the manual work. And then another thing that I have found helpful is the RACI model. It's where it's defined by who is responsible, who is accountable, who needs to be consulted, and who needs to be informed. I think having that a RACI model when things are a little bit murky, or when there's a lot of work that's all needs to be done, having a RACI model will really help everybody be clear on what their role is in certain tasks or certain projects. And this again cuts down that feeling of that overwhelming feeling and chaos.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, our next question: is there a role for internal coaching in addressing quiet quitting? And you kind of touched on that just a little bit.
Yeah, I think depending on the organization size, small, medium-sized companies are the ones that are facing this problem the most. They might not necessarily have the budget for a dedicated internal coaching role. In this case, managers are the internal coach. Companies can also utilize outside resources to have training at the management level to help guide managers and provide them tools to utilize day to day and pass on, trickle down to the rest of the team.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so two-part question here. What does an impactful internal coaching program look like, and how can finance leaders get started with it?
Yes, I think proactively taking steps to keep employees engaged, boost their morale, and reward their valuable contribution to the company, you can avoid having a team full of quiet critters. Having regular one-on-one with your employees, not just to talk about the tasks that need to be done, but engage with them. Regular, meaningful check-ins are tremendous. You can get a sense of what's going on in the employee's life that may be affecting their work performances. And also, it makes them feel like they're more to you than just a workhorse. And you can develop chemistry and that personal connection to and individualization with them at that personal level. And that adds another layer of humanity to their day-to-day. And you can also take that chance to deliver messaging around accountability and purpose. They need to be able to converse freely with management, not only about their job, but about their hopes and aspiration. In other words, again, it's a safe space for this two-way conversation. And the outcome of these meetings should have a roadmap to help to guide an employee towards growth and what they want in life and career. Employees should walk away from these meetings with a clear understanding that their abilities and potential are recognized and appreciated, and that the employer is eager to facilitate their progress towards their goals.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think work-life balance is another big topic that the managers need to recognize this and not just say it, but actually practice it. And also just acknowledge transparency is going to be a word that I'm going to continue to repeat throughout this webinar, is transparency, where there's communication. That's how you keep them engaged. Everybody know not everything will be puppies and roses all the time, and people are okay with it as long as they feel like they understand what is going on.
Thank you for that. It's a great insight. Okay, so our next question, what should leaders do if they realize that people are quietly quitting because of them?
Well, I think, well, first you will know if your team has high attrition rate. And there should be exit interviews done, and you should really be looking at the exit interviews, or when you connect them, why are they quitting, and listen to what they're saying. And sometimes if they're giving you very generic answers, that is also very telling of why they're quitting. And that's because of that they don't feel this comfortness with you. They don't feel this bond with you, something that you're doing. Because it's usually, if it's not because of you, there's other mitigating factors. Employees will be very open and vocal about it. But when they're actually very quiet, I think then that is an indicator that they're quitting because of you. I would ask the employees to give feedbacks. Employees who are allowed to give feedbacks, they feel valued. Do not try to justify and argue with someone when they give you feedback. The words, I hear you, can you help me understand more? What could I do to change, and what could we do together to mitigate this? Those will show that you are actually listening to them, and that you actively want to make a difference and want things to change. Acknowledge you're not perfect, and open to feedback. Just as they are human beings, they're not perfect, neither are you. So I think having the humbleness and humility and being able to listen intently will be very important.
Thank you. Okay, so what can leaders do when quiet quitting is the result of an interpersonal conflict?
As much as we all say we're all adults, I find at workplaces there's yes, we're all adults, but sometimes conflicts does need take conflict resolution. I was stepping in and mediate, not just say, well, you guys are adults, go figure out yourself. That doesn't solve the problem. There are some conflict resolution courses that could really help management to know how to mitigate conflicts or how to handle conflicts. I think that is also a very good tool for management to learn and to trickle down to their team so everybody can learn. And also understanding conflict styles. That's one thing that I've noticed on teams, that when people have very different ways of handling conflict, that in itself creates more conflict. And lastly, utilize your HR team. HR should be able to step in and help with conflict resolutions or get unbiased views. And a lot of the time having HR in these conversations can bring in some unbiased opinions, and also make the employee feel like the company's taking this seriously.
Okay. Our next question, how can finance leaders overcome skepticism about their efforts to combat quiet quitting?
Yes. So again, I think transparency is really important. And when you talk about transparency, it's really what I find very effective is having your team members understanding the bigger picture, not just silo them to what pertains to their exact job, because it's all interrelated. And if they can understand what the upstream or the downstream impact or what their part of is in the bigger picture, they will be very skeptic that you are actually listening to them, or that you understand what they're going through. I think it's also acknowledge the problem and address the problem head on. Tell them, and then once you've listened to them, just come up with a plan on how we're going to fix it. And this is not a one-way street. They need to be open and honest, and managers need to reciprocate also. And also provide a work-life balance. Companies say that every company is touting that, but how many leaders and managers are actually promoting that and practicing that themselves? And when you just say it, but you don't actually practice it, employees will become even more skeptical and you will lose trust. Respecting working hours. And when things need to be done outside working hours, don't make employees feel like they're being taken for granted. For example, if you're working on a month-end close or quarterly or year-end close, acknowledge and preempt it with, I know we're going to have to work extra hours to get this done. This is the deadline. I appreciate the hard work we're going to have to do. I'm in it with you. And lead by example. If they're up all hours trying to get things done, you should be there to support them. That they don't see you as a leader that just delegates and clocks out and let them deal with and let them work, stretch themselves thin. Follow up with actual show of appreciation. Let's say once the month end is over, the close is over, show them your appreciation. Hey, I know you worked really hard. Why don't you take a few extra hours off when, on a light day? Please do so. Are you getting enough sleep? Have you ate today? Send them, what I've done is we'll send them a little token of appreciation, send them some cookies, send them a cup of coffee. It doesn't have to be extravagant, but it's a thought that counts, that you are thinking of them, that you know how hard they work. You might not be able to compensate them with raises or bonuses outright, but it's a day-to-day. A cup of coffee, some cookies, a donut. Those are the little things that they will appreciate, or even just ask, how are you doing? You must be exhausted. Thank you for your hard work. I think the word thank you is very important, that I think we don't hear enough from managers in a workspace. And let your team know that it's always a give and take, and that you're not taking them for granted, and vice versa, and for them to not take you for granted either.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Okay, so how can finance leaders build credibility with employees by demonstrating how their work contributes to the bottom line?
Yes. So I think it's really important to connect employees' work to the organization's mission, or give them that overarching bigger picture of what is happening, so they understand. In a team dynamic, it's essential that each player feels connected to their team's overarching mission and also to the company's mission. I think it's up to the managers to draw those connections for the employees. Celebrate good work by drawing connections to KPIs, have KPIs. Even if the connections are indirect or secondhand, employees who can tell their managers are behind them will stay motivated. Company OKRs are another great way to make sure employees have transparency, and how for them to know how their work is contributing to a common goal and mission, and what their individual contribution to that is, and what the upstream downstream impact is. And you'll hear over and over again, transparency and communication are key. Explain the bigger picture to them so they can see what is it that they're contributing to, and how essential and important their role, no matter how big or little the task is, or what level they're at, that they are all equally important.
Thank you. Okay, our next question. What specific actions can finance leaders take to foster a culture of engagement on their finance teams?
I think team bonding is really important. It is much easier to do the pre-COVID days, when everybody's used to going to the office 5 days a week. Remote working was not any type of norm. So I think it was much easier to bond in person, and when you're in the same space day in, day out. But in this post-COVID era, I think the way we work has changed forever. So it is even more important for the team to feel bonded. And so there's trust. You can't influence without trust. And it's not just bonding with your own team, but bonding with other teams to foster collaboration between team members. I've seen in these past 3 years, there's a lot, especially when there's a legacy employees who were there in the company before COVID and the employees that have joined the company during the COVID era, that there's a big distinction between their engagement with their peers, with their team members, with their coworkers, with other managers, with their own manager. And I've seen huge distinction amongst that. So make an effort now that the COVID restrictions are lifted. Do make that extra effort to do team events, and do it in person if possible. Maybe a little bit more dollars spent bringing everybody together since there are employees remote, but that is important. And at an organizational level, make sure that you do still have a company-wide event now, and have teams intermingle with each other. I think when you feel like you have a personal connection to somebody else, people are more willing to go that extra mile and more willing to listen and cooperate and collaborate. And I think having accountability is very important. Have weekly check-ins with all your reports to review what they've been working on and what they're tackling next. Accountability doesn't mean calling someone to the principal's office. It starts with transparent review of productivity and help them manage that along with clear expectations. Always, and then during these one-on-ones or during these check-ins, also talk about opportunities for them to learn and grow. Don't wait for official performance reviews to give feedbacks or discuss their career path. That's when people feel stagnant. And if they already don't have that connection to the company or don't have that loyalty, it is very easy for them to just jump ship for a few extra dollars. So actively check in and discuss their current job performance, ask them what they want in terms of career growth and how you're going to foster that and how you're going to guide them down that path. And so in this conversation should not be one-sided. Show that you want to hear what they want and not just saying, well, I think you're great at this, so you should do X, Y, Z. That becomes very one-sided. Do they really want to do that? Or do they have an interest? Hear what they're interested in so they feel like they have a mentor.
Thank you, Sharon. It's such great insight you've got. Okay, so let's move on to our next question now. What specific actions can finance leaders take to demonstrate a culture of engagement to potential employees?
Yes. I think when you're interviewing a potential employee, I think every person I've interviewed in these past few years have asked, well, what is the culture? And I think it's really important to proactively talk about it so they know that this is top of your mind, that it's a topic that you care about, and not just, when asked, you're going to give some corporate generic answer or you are just saying what they want. Being proactive, talking about what your management style is, what the team dynamic is, what the company mission and culture is, and give them actual examples of how you have demonstrated a good culture and leadership. So I usually, when I'm interviewing potential employees, I always give them a couple of examples to show them that when I talk about my management style, they're not just words, but I can give you actual examples of, in a certain situation, what did I do, what didn't I do, and what was the result of it. And I think potential employees really appreciate that. And again, I think that is building trust from day one when you start interviewing that person. And talk about how you will invest in their growth as a person, also in a professional setting, and always tie it back to an example so they know that these are not just words, and that builds that immediate trust from the beginning. And I'll be very transparent during the interview process of what the expectations are and where the company's at, what that job entails, what entails in the first 3 to 6 months versus a year. This prevents employees feel like once they do join that they've been caught by a bait and switch. And just, again, transparency. And I think as a manager, your employees should know what is expected of them before the first day and over time. And this is a live moving target. So communication is so important. You're Unless you're in very, very big corporates, a lot of time what your job description that you sign up for on your offer letter, if you look back at it 12 months later, there's going to be, it's not going to be 100%. Sometimes it might be close, but there'll be things that were added or things that didn't, you haven't really touched upon. But a lot of time, I think in growth companies, and I think that's, or mid-sized companies, this is why people do work for these companies, is that they have the opportunity to touch upon a lot of other things and not be siloed. So just make sure that they understand the working environment and the role responsibilities and how it could evolve and change, but it will evolve and change with then they have, and that they still have a say to it. It's not just being dictated to them. So, and so for example, you can mention that you eventually envision the position to expand to include different duties and what they would be. And a lot of times I would also just write in the interview asking like, what, right now, this is your role. This is how the company's evolving and growing. What are some of the things that you're also interested in? And show them that, well, if once you've accomplished what you can do in your role, I will do my best to get you exposed to those areas of interest. So you do have that, be able to have that progression in your career and be able to learn more than what your job description. And I find that candidates really appreciate that. And that's what gets them excited, that opportunity. One thing I used to do a lot is, a lot of people ask, we would love to learn about how to build models. And I would, if I'm doing some model building of extra time, I would open up to my whole team saying, hey, I'm going to be building a model. Anybody who wants to learn about how to build models, this is the time, come to my office and I will cast on the screen and talk through how I'm building models. And it's open up to anyone in the accounting and finance department, in my teams. It could be the AP accountant or the AR clerk, or it could be the FP&A manager, anyone. And I think they really appreciate that. It's almost like a mini training. So, but they know that no matter who you are, what position you're in, as long as you want the opportunity, you will foster that and you will try to give them that opportunity to get onto, to progress their career.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Sharon. Okay. Now we can move over to our audience Q&A. And audience members, just so you know, you can still enter questions into the chat and we'll head over and address some of the ones that have come through. Okay, so let's look at our first question. I believe this might be in two parts here. So how will society turn around the current, quote, I don't want to work attitude that's prevalent amongst younger employees? Accounting is not generally a 9-to-5 job. For example, they saw a video of a guy who made the news this past weekend for literally crying in video about how 8 hours is too much work. What are your thoughts on addressing these kinds of attitudes?
Yeah, I think this has been definitely a generational shift and change, especially with the Gen Z. That's where we're seeing a lot of this type of mentality. I think in general, having a hybrid work environment, a real office environment is really important. Yes, with the technology to support working remotely, but what they're missing out is learning that soft skills, that interpersonal skills, and that work ethics. So I think that's one thing. That's why I am really in favor of having some sort of hybrid work model, because the younger generations, a lot of them has never worked in a real office environment. They don't know what that looks like. And I also think that mentality of an employer of, working 40 hours a week is the minimum. Everybody should be, working above and beyond. I think that mentality needs to shift, that it's a different generation with to shift with it, that it's adjusting expectations on both sides. And I think this actively engaging in that next generation and really investing in them, not just if you treat them like they're just a work, a tool to complete work, they're going to reciprocate that and feel like one, saying, well, these are my set hours. I'm not going to do any more than that. And also a lot of times, I think we've all been there. If you had a set of tasks and you can finish it for the day under 8 hours, you do it in 6 hours. Should more tasks be added onto your plate just because you're efficient or you're capable? Or does it really matter? Or do I need to sit your butt in that chair for extra 2 hours just to show that you have completed your 8 hours of the day, and then some? I think it's really important that's why I go back to measuring productivity and what that means. What do you expect of employees? And be okay that if they can find a more efficient way, if they, that they can complete their task, give them that room and that space.
Thank you. Okay, so here's a very important question for someone. They're at critical mass. A critical mass of our skilled finance team seems to have quietly quit. Do you have any advice for us?
Yeah, I think it is to your leader, as a leader, to have those one-on-ones, or even just have a very open team meeting. Think, what are you guys feeling? What I know, and acknowledge that, whether the workload is too much or there's a lot of inefficiencies, give them a forum to talk about what are the difficulties and challenges they're facing, and address and ask them to participate in coming up with solutions. And then it's your job to make sure that gets implemented, and there's follow-ups to that. So, and I think it's not just within the finance accounting team. I've seen that when things are hard, I know the finance and accounting team seems to a lot of time be deprioritized. So this is also for finance management to manage up and manage across, to make sure that that they're not at the end of the line holding the bag of problems, and that it is, because I've seen this happen a lot in the past couple years. So I think it's just really, you have to step in and address the problem head on, and not avoid it or think, okay, well, we can just replace it with other people. It really doesn't work like that.
Thank you. Okay, so our next question: what's the biggest mistake you've seen companies make in trying to increase employee engagement, and how do they get past this?
Yes. So I think one of the mistakes that companies do make is they do send out an employee engagement survey, but it's never addressed or followed up. I've seen companies who've done it very well, and that has kept their turnover down. There's a lot of SaaS tools out there that can do anonymous employee engagement survey, and I think being anonymous, it is so key. And you have to reiterate to your team members, hey, please take this survey. It is completely anonymous. And management need to take a hard look at those results. And once you do, come up with plans how you're going to address it. And then each manager needs to go back to their team member and say, this is what has the results of employee engagement survey. Do you guys have any more feedbacks for me? And this is what we are as a management team doing to address it. And we hear you. I think just sending out surveys, and if you don't have any follow-up, employees actually will even disengage even more, and you actually even lose more credibility, because they feel like you're just doing the motions of pretending or showing that you care, but you don't really care.
Thank you so much. Okay, so our next question here: why are we even having this conversation? In my day, people counted themselves lucky to even have a job. What can we do to combat over-entitled behavior among our employees?
Yeah, I think, times have changed, especially in this global environment, post-COVID, having new technology that allows us to work almost anywhere for any company, versus before, back, you're more localized to where you can physically work. So I don't think employees had much choice. Like if I live in New York City, I am not going to be working at a job in Boston or Philadelphia because there's just no physical way. But now I can work for a job anywhere essentially in the world. So I think that is just the change of time. Technology has definitely enabled that. New working environment has enabled this. And it's really going back to understanding what your employees want. And I think you'll see it's not a one size fits all. Like the younger generation, Gen Z, what they're looking for, what they want will be very different than what somebody who are of a different generation would want. And be able to individualize is very important. And I think comes back to individualization, really understanding, not even within a generation, all Gen Zs, they're not all the same either. What does this person want? How to bring out the best in this person? Then you will know how to get them engaged. And I think innately, when they're engaged, they will be more willing to give more. I don't think all of Gen Z is inherently lazy. And I think they're being inherently lazy people across any generation. But I think it's just this new generation just haven't had as much of that soft skills that were learned, which you see work ethics, which you learn how to be part of something bigger than yourself. I think isolation these past few years has been really hard on the younger generation, and they feel incredibly isolated. So those are a couple of pieces of advice.
Yes, thank you. So we have a follow-up to one of your previous questions, and let's see what your thoughts on. It was to the first question. I'll just briefly go over it or just reiterate it really quick. The first question was, how will society turn around the current "I don't want to work" attitude that's prevalent among their younger employees? The follow-up was, they believe that it is a generational issue, and how can we change it? How will we change this? Do you have any thoughts? I feel like you just touched a little bit on that on the previous one.
Yeah, I think here's a great example. I'll be the first to admit I'm not a person who has the answer to everything. So what I would do is engaging. I would engage and ask, why do you think that your generation, whether it's if you have have this more of this thought. I think it's, if you look at the whole technology evolution, much older generations, they were very resistant to a lot of technology changes. And how does society combat that? I think there's a lot of just naturally progression of the day to day. They get used to it, but it's also, but also I think companies have to again evolve in order to battle. You cannot try to force things to go back to the way it was. You have to go with the flow and think about ways. Now, this is a situation. You can fight it, or you can come up with solutions to address it. Whether it's having more training for younger employees on soft skill set, not necessarily technical skill set, but soft skill set. I think having I think this generation, especially with social media, with the internet, that they want to be heard. So hear them. And as a company, as managers, as somebody from an older generation, evolve with them. Both sides have to evolve.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's a good insight. Okay, so our next question: how do you manage your remote employees? For example, monitoring the amount of work that they are assigned. How do you do this?
Yeah, so I'm not a fan of having some sort of digital monitoring on how much time they spend on their computer or clocking out. I think that actually destroys trust. I think having very concise expectations, going over, what their tasks are, and just having those one-on-one touch base, especially if they're remote, maybe have it twice a week. and just really go over, what's on your plate, what is coming up on your deck, how are you doing, and just having those check-ins. I had to fully onboard, fully build out and onboard my whole teams, multiple teams remotely these past few years. And it does take a lot of effort as a manager to really make sure your employees feel connected to you. And also that you keep a pulse on what they're doing, having clear deadlines, having clear expectations set, but also not rigid ones where so that you're constantly working with them. Help me help you. There are some tools out there that could also help. For example, I like to use Asana. Asana keeps track of my team's productivity, and people can also see what their other team members are doing, or if there's a project or a task or certain things that apply to multiple people, multiple departments within your department, such as a month-end close. Using something like an Asana could really help, even if you use a G Sheet as a tracker, but some that defines accountability and that keeps, and also everything's clear and concise.
Thank you so much. Okay, so with that, we've got a few minutes left. Would you like to go through any closing thoughts or anything like that? We're rounding up our questions. Would you like to sum it all up?
Yeah, I think this quiet quitting is very real. There's a lot of COVID burnout, work that's disengagement, not at a company level, at a work level, but also at a interpersonal social level. So do not treat your employees as disposable. I think human capital is your biggest asset to any company. Treat people with kindness, treat people with respect, give them that human connection that they need. I think the line of work and personal life has really blurred, especially as we continue to work remote or have a hybrid model, that it is not healthy to have a completely blurred line that. And it does take that extra effort. And we do as managers, as leaders, have to make that extra effort to help our employees, and build some sort of loyalty to the company so that they know what they're contributing to, and so that they don't. And I think that's when employees can be happy. And I really do think, other than talking about work, it is really important to build that personal connection with them.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Are we able to keep up with you through social media, anything like that?
Absolutely. I am on LinkedIn. I think that I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I think you guys can definitely keep up with me on social media.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. We appreciate you so much for being here today and speaking with us. And so I just want to thank you for that.
I hope this could give people a little bit more insight and help on how I've kept my teams from quiet quitting. And hopefully this has been helpful and useful to all of you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sharon. Also, I want to thank everyone else for being here today. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Sharon.